Hi everyone, and welcome back to another devlog for my indie retro RPG. In the last video, I went over all the stats that affect your health, energy, mana, damage, hit chance, etc. At this point, the battle system is largely done. There are a bunch of little bugs to fix and numbers to tweak, but the major features are all there. I've been plugging away at the battle system for so long, and I figure it's time to turn my attention to other game systems. Since I just got all the stats into the game, I figured a good place to start would be the character stat and inventory screens. I had a vague idea of how I wanted everything to look and be organized, but as I started laying things out, I ran into my first problem: screen space. I'm building this game at a resolution of 320 by 180, which is perfect for a retro NES style game like this. The big downside is that it really limits how much I can put on the screen at a time while still having it be legible. For example, take the font. I'm using a recreation of the Dragon Warrior font. I really like it, but it's unreadable at anything lower than 8 pixels. And 8 pixels takes up a lot of space on the screen when your window's 320 by 180. So I've had to be creative with the stats and inventory. Here's what the whole thing looks like right now. There may be some minor changes, but I'm overall really happy with this. First, we've got the stats window. It lists out all the major stats in the game, and they update depending on what gear you have equipped. Given the lack of screen space, I've had to use abbreviations, which I'm actually okay with. It adds to that retro look, since a lot of the old RPGs had to use abbreviations to fit size and text limitations. Down at the bottom, I've put the resistances. I mentioned in my last video that the floating combat text when you hit enemies is color-coded based on resistance type. I stuck to that same color coding here to make it quicker and easier to see what your resistances are. Up above the resistances is the equipment window. This is where you'll drop items to put them on, and again, due to font size limitations, I've had to be creative with abbreviations here. I played around a bit with how best to lay out these equipment slots. I tried kind of putting them in the rough shape of a person and spreading them around a bit. However, I kind of like this grid system the most. It still has logic in terms of anatomy, with head, earrings, etc. being at the top, and feet and legs being at the bottom. It's heavily inspired by EverQuest's original equipment slots, which were laid out in similar rows. Finally, in the bottom right, we've got the inventory. It's a simple grid system where one item equals one space in the inventory, no matter how big or small the item might be. One feature I still need to add here is stackable items. For example, I plan to implement health, mana, and energy potions, so I'd like for you to be able to stack those so your inventory doesn't get filled up with them so quickly. You might be asking how you can see the stats of individual items. Well, that's a great question. I considered doing some kind of a tooltip pop-up when you hover over items, but something about that feels too, modern. So I put this little bit up in the top right called the inspect window. So if you right-click on an item, it'll populate the inspect window with the item stats. It also shows a larger image for the item. And I really like this because it lets me be a bit more creative and add more detail to the graphics. Each item icon in the inventory is 16 by 16, so the amount of detail is really limited. But this way, for each item, I can make a simple inventory icon at 16 by 16, and then a more detailed image for the inspect window. I also added a feature where you can right-click on the equip slots to get detail on what items can go where, so you're not just guessing at what each abbreviation means. Another feature I'd like to add at some point is highlighting. So when you pick up an item in your inventory, the equipment slots it can be put into will enlarge or highlight or something like that. So like if you pick up a ring, the 2 ring slots might turn green or highlight or enlarge or something. But that falls under bells and whistles, so I'll worry about that at a later date. All right, I think that covers my tour of the stats and inventory screen. Let me know in the comments what you think of the layout and the functionality of it. I'm really trying to keep the retro NES aesthetic and feel as much as possible while still making a game that is easy to use and isn't frustrating to navigate. So I'd love input. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see future devlogs.